They say that silence doesn't lie. It just waits for the exact moment to reveal everything at once. And when it speaks, it does so without mercy, without filter, without detours. It doesn't raise its voice, doesn't throw objects to the floor, doesn't make scenes. It only leaves traces. Sometimes on a simple piece of paper next to a coffee maker, other times in the dry sound of a bank notification you didn't expect to read that morning. For Helena Vidal, silence didn't arrive as a comforting whisper, but as a direct shot to the soul, disguised as 11 words that dismantled her life without warning. That was the beginning of the end, or perhaps of the true beginning. The first month after the abandonment passed like a nightmare from which Helena couldn't wake up. Each morning, upon opening her eyes, she experienced those brief seconds of confusion before reality hit her again. She was alone, without savings, with a small daughter and a future as uncertain as it was threatening. Calls to Renato went unanswered. Her messages appeared as read, but she never received a reply. It was as if he had disappeared from the face of the earth, taking with him not only the money, but also any sense of responsibility toward the daughter they had created together. One particularly difficult afternoon, while reviewing pending bills scattered on the dining room table, the doorbell rang. A formal-looking man with a briefcase handed her an envelope. "Mrs. Helena Vidal?" he asked in a monotonous tone. "Yes, that's me," she responded, feeling a knot forming in her stomach. Formal notification of default on the personal loan with Continental Bank. Please sign here. Helena took the document with trembling hands. A loan of 45,000 euros in both their names, requested just 2 weeks before Renato's departure. A loan of which she had not the slightest idea. "There must be some mistake," she murmured, more to herself than to the messenger. "I never signed this." The man shrugged with professional indifference. "Ma'am, the document has your digital signature. First notice before proceeding legally. Good afternoon." When the door closed, Helena collapsed on the sofa, holding the paper, as if it were a bomb about to explode. Not only had Renato emptied their savings, but he had also left her neck-deep in debt with a fraudulent loan. The betrayal reached new dimensions that she couldn't have imagined even in her worst nightmares. That night, after putting Sophia to bed, Helena experienced something new. A cold, crystalline rage that replaced the confused pain of the previous weeks. The sadness hadn't disappeared, but now it shared space with a nascent determination. She needed to act, and quickly. The next morning, she called the school, informing them that Sophia would not attend due to illness. Then, she took her daughter by the hand, and together they visited 3 places: the bank, a legal advisory office, and finally a pawn shop. At the bank, the reality was even more devastating than she had expected. Not only was there the loan debt, but also 3 maxed-out credit cards in her name. The advisor, a young man with a compassionate look behind metal-framed glasses, patiently explained to her how Renato had been able to access her digital identity to carry out these operations. "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Vidal, but legally these debts are also yours as you are married under a community property regime," he concluded gravely. "You can, of course, initiate legal action against your husband, but in the meantime, creditors will consider you jointly liable." The legal office didn't offer better prospects. She could report Renato for misappropriation and signature forgery, but the processes would be long, costly, and with no guarantee of recovering the money, especially if he had left the country, as she suspected. It was at the pawn shop where Helena made her first truly difficult decision. With Sophia entertained with a book in a corner, she took out a small velvet box from her purse. Inside was her engagement ring, a pearl necklace inherited from her grandmother, and some gold earrings that had belonged to her mother. "How much would you give me for all this?" she asked firmly to the gray-haired man behind the counter. The appraiser examined the pieces with an expert eye. The pearls are authentic, good quality. The ring, the diamond is small but with good clarity. The earrings have value mainly for the weight of the gold. He performed some calculations on a worn calculator. I could offer you 3,500 euros for everything. It was less than she expected, but enough for the overdue rent and immediate expenses while she looked for employment. Helena nodded without allowing herself to doubt. Agreed. When the man handed her the cash, something strange happened inside her. These jewels represented important moments, sentimental connections, promises, and now they were simply bills in her hand. There was something painfully liberating about that exchange, as if she were liquidating not only objects, but also the weight of a past that no longer served her. "Mom, why did you give the shiny ring to the man?" Sophia asked as they left the store. Helena crouched down to be at eye level with her daughter, those eyes so similar to Renato's that it sometimes hurt to look at them directly, because sometimes, my love, we need to let go of some things in order to hold on to other more important ones, she replied with a softness that contrasted with the storm inside her. And right now, the most important thing is that you and I are okay. The following weeks were an exercise in survival. Helena sold practically everything that had any value. The vinyl collection she had accumulated over years, the special edition books, even the flat-screen TV they had bought together. To celebrate Renato's promotion 2 years earlier, the apartment was becoming increasingly empty, as if the physical space reflected the emotional emptying that Helena was experiencing. Sleep became a luxury rarely attained. Nights were dedicated to searching for work online, studying possible legal solutions, calculating and recalculating her finances, trying to stretch each euro to the maximum. During the day, she maintained a facade of normality for Sophia, improvising games that didn't require expensive toys, inventing fantastic stories to compensate for the absence of television, preparing economical but nutritious meals with the most basic foods. One afternoon, while reviewing job offers for the umpteenth time, Helena found an advertisement that caught her attention. Administrative assistant for financial consultancy, schedule compatible with family responsibilities. No specific experience required. The salary wasn't impressive, but it exceeded the minimum wage, and most importantly, it expressly mentioned scheduling flexibility. With Sophia in public school and no one who could help her with child care outside of school hours, this factor was crucial. Helena prepared her resume meticulously. She had no recent experience, having left her administration job when Sophia was born. But she highlighted her organizational skills, her command of languages, and her ability to work under pressure. This last quality, she thought with bitter irony, had been extensively developed in recent months. The day of the interview dawned rainy, as if the weather wanted to add one more obstacle to her already complicated situation. She left Sophia with the neighbor from the 5th floor, a kind elderly woman who had offered to help her occasionally, and headed to the indicated address under a rickety umbrella that barely protected her from the downpour. The building was modern, all glass and steel, located in one of the most prestigious business areas of the city. Helena immediately felt out of place with her slightly outdated suit and worn shoes. In the elevator, she briefly looked at herself in the mirror. Deep eye bags, pale skin, anxious gaze. She took a deep breath, straightened her back, and reminded herself that she had no choice. Failure was not a possibility she could afford. The reception of Vertex Financial Consultants was a minimalist space dominated by whites and grays. The receptionist, an impeccably groomed young woman, greeted her with a professional smile. "Good morning, I have an interview with Mrs. Constanza Herrera," Helena informed, striving to keep her voice firm. "Of course, Mrs. Vidal, they are waiting for you in the boardroom, second door on the right." Helena followed the directions, feeling her heart pounding against her ribs. Upon entering the room, she found 3 people seated around a glass table, 2 middle-aged men and a woman who appeared to be around 50, with short platinum hair and a presence that radiated natural authority. "Mrs. Vidal, welcome," said this woman, extending her hand. "I'm Constanza Herrera, CEO of Vertex." The interview began conventionally with questions about her education and previous experience. But it soon took an unexpected turn when Constanza asked, "I see a 5-year gap in your resume. Could you explain it?" It was the question Helena feared. She momentarily hesitated between giving an ambiguous answer or being completely honest. Something in Constanza's direct gaze pushed her toward honesty. "I became a mother and chose to dedicate myself to raising my daughter during her first years," she explained. "Recently, my family situation has changed drastically, and I need to re-enter the job market urgently," Constanza observed her intently, as if evaluating not only her words, but also what they concealed. "What has changed exactly?" she inquired in a neutral tone. Helena felt a lump in her throat. She didn't want to appear as a victim, but she also couldn't pretend a non-existent normality. "My husband abandoned us 2 months ago, taking our savings and leaving us with considerable debts," she responded with a frankness that surprised even herself. "I have a 5-year-old daughter who depends completely on me, and I'm determined to rebuild our life from scratch." A tense silence followed her declaration. The 2 men exchanged uncomfortable looks, but Constanza kept her eyes fixed on Helena, her expression inscrutable. "And why should we hire you with all this? Complicated situation instead of some candidate without such personal distractions?" she finally asked. The question hit Helena like a slap. For a fleeting instant, she felt tears threatening to emerge. But then, from some deep place within her being, a surprising clarity emerged. This was her opportunity, perhaps the only one she would have, and she wasn't going to waste it feeling offended or vulnerable. "Precisely because I have this complicated situation," she responded with a calmness she didn't know she possessed. "I need this job more than any other candidate, which means I will work harder with more dedication and with greater efficiency. I have no margin for failure, Mrs. Herrera, and that makes me your best investment. Besides," she added with growing confidence, "if there's something I've learned in these 2 months, it's how to manage crises, prioritize limited resources, and find creative solutions under extreme pressure. Skills quite useful in financial consultancy, I would say." For the first time since the interview began, a hint of a smile appeared on Constanza's lips. "Interesting perspective," she commented. "One last question, Mrs. Vidal. If we hire you, what would be your first professional goal here?" Helena didn't need to think about the answer. "To learn. To absorb everything I can about your business and this industry. My goal is to become indispensable to Vertex in the shortest possible time." When she left the building, the rain had ceased. A pale sun was breaking through the clouds, illuminating the wet streets. Helena didn't know if she had gotten the job, but she felt a strange satisfaction. For the first time since Renato's abandonment, she had spoken about her situation without feeling shame or self-pity. She had defended her value and her capabilities. Whatever the result, something important had changed within her. The debt was still there, the difficulties persisted, but Helena was beginning to glimpse a path forward, a path that surprisingly didn't involve recovering what was lost, but rather building something completely new from the rubble. 3 days later, she received the call. The position was hers. She could start the following week with a schedule that would allow her to drop off and pick up Sophia from school. The salary was modest, but included a performance bonus that could help her significantly if she worked hard. That night, as she watched Sophia sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the storms that buffeted adult life, Helena allowed a small spark of hope to ignite within her. The debt was still a seemingly insurmountable mountain. The emotional wounds were far from healed, and the path ahead was full of obstacles. But for the first time since that fateful dawn, she felt that there existed a possible future where she and Sophia would be okay. What she couldn't imagine then was that this modest job as an administrative assistant would not only allow her to survive, but would open the door to a much deeper transformation than she had ever dreamed of. The first days at Vertex Financial Consultants were a whirlwind of names, procedures, and concepts that Helena struggled to assimilate. Her initial responsibilities were basic: managing schedules, preparing documentation for meetings, answering calls, organizing files. Simple tasks, but ones that required precision and order, qualities that Helena had always possessed. What no one expected, not even herself, was the speed with which she would begin to understand the underlying business. During the first weeks, Helena didn't limit herself to transcribing meeting minutes. She studied them meticulously, seeking to understand the financial terms she didn't know, the strategies that were discussed, the problems that were posed. Each night, after putting Sophia to bed, she dedicated at least an hour to researching concepts and procedures mentioned during the day. On a particularly hectic Thursday, 3 months after her incorporation, the first turning point in her trajectory occurred. Constanza had an important meeting scheduled with a potential client, but her personal assistant had suddenly fallen ill. The documents for the presentation were incomplete, and time was pressing. "I need someone to sort out this chaos before 4, Constanza commented with evident frustration as she reviewed the scattered files. Helena, who was delivering correspondence at that moment, stopped. "Can I help with that, Mrs. Herrera?" she offered. Constanza looked at her skeptically. "It's a financial restructuring proposal for Aldama Group. Quite complex." "I know," Helena responded calmly. "I've been transcribing the notes from the preliminary meetings. I think I can organize the documentation coherently." "More out of lack of alternatives than conviction," Constanza agreed. "You have 2 hours." Helena immersed herself in the task with absolute concentration. She not only organized the documents, but also identified inconsistencies in some projections and discreetly corrected them. Additionally, she prepared an executive summary highlighting the strengths of the proposal, something that hadn't been explicitly requested of her. When she delivered the completed work, Constanza reviewed the materials with increasing attention. Her expression, normally impassive, revealed surprise. "You did this?" she asked, pointing to the executive summary and corrections. "Yes," confirmed Helena. "I hope I didn't overstep. I noticed some inconsistencies in the third quarter projections that could compromise the viability of the plan." Instead of the reprimand she half expected, Constanza sketched one of her rare smiles. "Interesting. Would you mind attending the meeting? You could take notes." The meeting with Aldama Group went better than expected. The client, initially skeptical, was impressed with the clarity and solidity of the proposal. When one of the executives raised an objection about the implementation timeframes, Constanza looked at Helena, who had been observing silently from a corner. "Mrs. Vidal, any comment on this?" Helena's heart skipped a beat. She didn't expect to be invited to participate. However, she had been closely following the discussion and had a clear idea. "If I may," she began, addressing the client with a confidence that surprised everyone, including herself. "The concern about time frames is completely valid. However, if we look at Appendix C of our proposal, you'll see that we've designed a modular implementation system. This would allow starting with the most urgent elements, specifically the restructuring of the finance department and the optimization of suppliers, while simultaneously developing aspects that require more internal deliberation." The silence that followed her intervention was tense but brief. The executive who had raised the objection reviewed the mentioned document with renewed interest. "Indeed," he finally conceded, "I hadn't considered this approach. It would solve our main obstacle." At the end of the meeting, with a pre-agreement signed that exceeded Vertex's initial expectations, Constanza observed Helena with an indecipherable expression. "My office." 5 minutes," was all she said, before cordially saying goodbye to the clients. Helena waited outside Constanza's office with a mixture of pride and anxiety. She didn't know if she had crossed some invisible line by intervening so directly in the negotiation. "Close the door," Constanza indicated when Helena entered, "and sit down." For several seconds, the CEO simply observed her, as if evaluating a particularly complex equation. "Where did you learn about corporate financial structures?" she finally asked. "I didn't learn formally," confessed Helena. "I've been studying on my own. I read the reports, researched terms, analyzed similar cases on the internet. I learned quickly." Constanza nodded slowly. "So it seems. But there's something more than simple technical learning. Your intervention today, you demonstrated an understanding of client psychology that some of my consultants with masters in finance don't possess after years of experience." Helena allowed herself a small smile. "Perhaps because I don't come from the financial world, I can see some things from a different perspective. Or perhaps," added Constanza with sharpness, "because someone who has faced a personal crisis as severe as yours develops a special sensitivity to identify the true concerns that underlie formal objections." The comment touched a sensitive fiber in Helena. It was true. Since Renato's abandonment, she had developed an almost instinctive ability to detect the unsaid, to perceive hidden motivations, to identify vulnerabilities. It was a skill born of pain and the need for survival. "Starting tomorrow," continued Constanza, "you will no longer be an administrative assistant. I want you as an executive assistant directly under my supervision. Your salary doubles, and you'll start formal training in financial consultancy." "Excuse me?" stammered Helena, sure she had misheard. "Don't make me repeat it," responded Constanza, with a flash of amusement in her normally severe eyes. "I recognize talent when I see it, and it would be stupid to waste it. You'll have to work twice as hard and study in your free time, but something tells me that won't be a problem for you." That night, Helena returned home with a mixture of emotions that she could barely process. The promotion meant not only a better salary, crucial for her precarious financial situation, but also professional recognition that she had never experienced. For the first time since the abandonment, she felt that she controlled her destiny. The following months were a roller coaster of intensive learning and growing challenges. Constanza turned out to be a demanding but fair mentor. She made no concessions for Helena's personal situation, but neither did she deny her opportunities because of it. She constantly pushed her out of her comfort zone, assigning her progressively greater responsibilities. "I didn't hire you out of pity," she frequently reminded her. "I hired you because you have something that can't be taught: hunger." And Helena was indeed hungry. Hungry for knowledge, for economic security, for professional validation. Hungry to build a life where she would never again be at the mercy of another, where Sophia would grow up seeing a strong and self-sufficient mother. One day, 6 months after her initial promotion, Constanza called her to her office again. "We have a delicate situation with Pacific Investments," she explained without preamble. "They've threatened to terminate their contract, which would be a significant blow to our quarterly finances. Apparently, they're not satisfied with the current team." Helena knew the case well. Pacific Investments was one of Vertex's oldest and most lucrative clients, but also one of the most demanding. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, anticipating that she would have to prepare some report or review documentation. Constanza's response left her momentarily speechless. "Take charge of the client, completely. It's yours." "But the current team has consultants with years of experience, masters in finance, industry contacts," protested Helena, genuinely confused. "And yet they're about to lose the client," pointed out Constanza impatiently. "Sometimes too much traditional experience can be a limitation. We need a fresh approach." I don't know if I'm prepared, admitted Helena honestly. Of course you're not, responded Constanza with brutal frankness. No one really is for important leaps, but I've observed how you work, how you think, how you relate to clients in the few interactions you've had. You have something that traditional consultants rarely possess: genuine empathy combined with ruthless pragmatism, a powerful combination. The meeting with Pacific Investments was scheduled for the following week. Helena dedicated every available minute to preparing. She exhaustively studied the client's history, analyzed their balance sheets, identified patterns in their previous complaints, researched their competitors. The night before, she barely slept, mentally reviewing every possible scenario. The financial director of Pacific Investments, an older man with a perpetually discontented expression, received her with evident skepticism.